The UFC is heading to Mexico City for the March 29th Fight Night card. Really fun main event between Brandon Moreno and Steve Erceg. So I'm going to be going through my full card predictions for this card. Prelims, main card, timestamps are going to be in the description. Would love to hear your thoughts. If you agree, disagree, let me hear it down below. But diving into the current prelim opener here, we have Austin Hubbard taking on Marquel Mederos. For Austin Hubbard here, he is 1-2 since getting back into the UFC, coming in on The Ultimate Fighter. He's a tough out, he's durable, can grind out wins, wants to push his wrestling, really mix things up. On the other side with Mederos, he's a pretty fun striker. He's 1-0 in the UFC, had a nasty knee knockout on the Contender Series. I do think he's the more dangerous guy. I think he has more finishing upside in this matchup. But Austin Hubbard has been pretty durable throughout his career. He has never been knocked out. He has never been dropped in the UFC. And he has a pretty decent number of fights within the promotion. So he is tough to get out of there. I do think Mederos' striking is going to carry him in this matchup. I think he's going to be able to defend the takedowns, or at least, not be controlled. I think he's going to win the exchanges on the feet. And I'm going to go with Marquel Mederos by decision. In this next matchup, we have Jamall Emmers taking on Gabriel Miranda. Jamall Emmers has a 3-4 UFC record, but he has a very, very strong strength of schedule. When we're looking at his 4 losses, he has lost to Giga Chikadze, which was a split decision. He was submitted by Pat Sabatini. He was knocked out by Nate Landwehr. And then he lost a very close decision to Jack Jenkins that I think a lot of people thought he probably should have won. So he very easily could be 4-3 against pretty tough comp. He's primarily a striker, but he is willing to mix it up. Very good takedown defense at 90% in his UFC career. Jamall Emmers, like I said, fairly well-rounded. On the other side with Gabriel Miranda, he is pretty much like submission or bust. He has a 17-7 record as a pro, 1-2 in the UFC. He has finished all 17 of his wins, and 16 of those 17 wins are by submission. In his 2 UFC losses, he was knocked out in both of them. Albeit it was against pretty tough competition. He had to debut up at 155 against Benoit Saint-Denis. And then his other loss was against Morgan Charrier, who's fighting on the London card. A very, very solid fighter. So Miranda's going to want to push his grappling. He's going to want to get his submission game going. But he kind of just becomes a sitting duck if he's unsuccessful in that area. I also think he has the ability to fade. I would kind of favor Emmers if this is a fight that goes long. So I think Emmers is going to get the finish in this matchup. I think his takedown defense is going to be good enough to stifle the grappling offense of Miranda, and I think he's going to end up finding a knockout. So I'll go round 2 KO for Jamall Emmers. Does have, a decent amount of power. We saw in that Nate Landwehr fight, he nearly finished him super early on. Landwehr came back, as he tends to do, but I do think Emmers has the, upside on the feet to finish this one. Then we're going to move over to Melqui Costa taking on Christian Rodriguez. And I'm just going to be honest, I'm kind of done picking against C-Rod here. I thought he was going to lose against Raul Rosas. I thought he was going to lose against Cameron Saimon. I thought he was going to lose against Isaac Dulgarian. And I thought he was going to lose his most recent fight against Austin Bashi. So he's just consistently going up against these prospects and coming out on top, right? I think the UFC thought Rosas would be able to get through him. He was not able to. Then he gets another top prospect in Cameron Saimon. He weathers that storm. Then he has to move up to 145 because he has trouble making weight, and he beats Isaac Dulgarian. I think it probably should have been a 28-28 draw, but, he gets the nod on the scorecards. And then another top prospect in Austin Bashi, he goes out and gets the win there. He's durable. He's well-rounded. He's able to weather an early storm and win those later rounds. And, with that kind of style, he does have very, very strong cardio. On the other side here with Costa, he is 3-2 in the UFC, but he is 3-0 at 145. So his 2 losses have come up at 155. When he's decided to move down or stay down at featherweight, he has found a lot of success. His last fight was fairly recent. February 22nd, he had a guillotine win against Andre Fili. He's well-rounded, 7 knockouts, 8 submission wins, 7 decisions. Like I said, though, I am going to go with Christian Rodriguez here. He's very durable. He's tough to finish. I think if this goes into, the second, third round, he's going to have, probably the advantage in those rounds. I think he has faced the tougher competition, and he has come out on top against that tough comp. So I'm going to go with C-Rod by decision here, but I would expect this one to be fairly competitive. Then we're going to have Rafa Garcia taking on Vinc Pichel. And at this point, like in 2025, it's pretty tough to trust Vinc Pichel here. His last win was in 2021. He has only fought 2 times since then. Both of those have been losses, and he's really just getting up there in age. The man's 42. Like at one point, Vinc Pichel was 7-2 in the UFC. I believe that was in 2021. but, he's getting up there in age, hasn't had great results as of late. He is someone who likes to rely on his control wrestling. Rafa Garcia has fine enough takedown defense at 75%. In his last 6 fights, he is 4-2 in the UFC, and his only losses have come to Grant Dawson, where he was controlled, on the ground, but Grant Dawson is just a complete different level in terms of getting your back and racking up control time, landing ground and pound. And then Drakkar Klose, who I think is kind of on that fringe of the top 15. So Rafa Garcia, just the way younger guy, I'm going to pick him to win this one by decision. Then up next, we have our first and only women's fight on this card. We have Julia Polastri taking on Loopy Godinez. For Polastri here, she is 1-1 in the UFC, has a split decision win against Corey McKenna, and then a unanimous decision loss to Josephine Knutson. She's not really dominant in one specific area, but she's a capable striker, has capable grappling. In her career, she has 4 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission. As is the case with a lot of these women kind of newer in the UFC, those finishes are typically coming against lower competition on the regional scene. On the other side here for Loopy, she has just been extremely active in her UFC career. This is going to be her 13th fight in the promotion, and she's been in the UFC for under 4 years at this point. I think it's going to be 4 years, maybe in April, but extremely active, averaging over 3 fights a year during that span. She's won 6 of her last 9 fights, and her only losses have come to solid ranked competition in the strawweight weight class. Losses to Mackenzie Dern, Virna Jandiroba, and then Angela Hill. She pushes a high pace. She's at her best where she's able to mix in the wrestling, but she's also fine, winning just a high-paced striking battle. I'm going to give Loopy the edge here. I just think she's more proven, has better wins against better competition. I do think it could be competitive, but I'm going to go with Loopy by decision. Also, Loopy's kind of undersized for the weight class, but Polastri also isn't all that big for strawweight, so I expect them to be, pretty similar size. Going to go with Loopy Godinez by decision. Moving on to Ateba Gautier taking on Jose Medina. Probably butchered Gautier's name, my apologies. But he is a very fun prospect. He's very raw, only 6-1, 5 wins by knockout. The dude is only 22 years old, so still very, very young, especially in some of the heavier weight classes at middleweight. He has a huge frame for the weight class, 6'4", 81-inch reach. He's extremely explosive. He's very powerful. He also just has not faced the best competition. He only has 2 opponents with over 2 wins, so not fighting a ton of high-level guys. He did have a nice win on the Contender Series where, he was controlled a little bit, but was able to come back, find the finish, obviously landed some huge shots because he is super powerful. On the other side with Medina here, I just don't think he's all that UFC caliber. I think this is a pretty reasonable first fight for Gautier, kind of getting his feet wet in the promotion, because Medina here, he has an 11-4 record, but he has 1 singular win against someone who has at least 3 wins and a winning record. So every time he's gotten a step up in competition, he's pretty much fallen, and he's picking up wins against guys with losing records or guys that are 1-0, 2-0, and he obviously has 15 fights of pro experience. He lost on the Contender Series, and then he also lost in his UFC debut. He got control grappled in both of them. Now, that's not really Gautier's game. He'd prefer to go out there and strike, but I think he's just going to be better wherever this fight goes. I'm going Gautier by round 1 knockout. Then going back down to some of the lighter weight classes, we have Edgar Chairez taking on CJ Vergara, and both these guys have faced pretty tough competition so far in their UFC career. In Chairez's 2 UFC losses, he has taken on Tetsuro Taira and Joshua Van. Those are both, easy top 15 caliber in flyweight. And then for CJ Vergara's losses, he has taken on Tetsuro Taira also, Sual Mabayev, and then Ramazan Temirov. Vergara has really gotten a tough shake. It seems like every time there's a new prospect coming in, they're just feeding him to CJ Vergara. When we look at Vergara's wins, though, his 3 wins in the UFC have a combined record of 1-11. That is tough. So even though he's picking up some wins in the promotion, it is really against the bottom of the barrel at flyweight here. CJ Vergara is going to want to strike. He has 7 wins by knockout, 0 submission wins. He has not landed a single takedown in the UFC, so he's primarily going to be standing on the feet. For Edgar Chairez, he is much more willing to mix it up. He's an 100% finish rate in his wins. He has 4 knockouts, 7 submissions. Not someone who's going to go out and wrestle super offensively, but if the other guy tries to wrestle him, he does have that, submission offense. I just think Chairez is the more well-rounded guy. Even though neither guy has a ton of high-quality wins in the UFC, I am going to side with Edgar Chairez here by decision. 100% finish rate. CJ Vergara is tough. He has been dropped in certain fights, but Chairez doesn't really have the same power as some of the guys that CJ Vergara has faced. For this next matchup, we're going to be moving up one weight class up to bantamweight, where we have Raul Rosas Jr. taking on Vince Morales. I kind of like the matchmaking here for Rosas. I think they pushed him a little bit too soon when he took on Christian Rodriguez in his second fight, but I also think they kind of just maybe misread how good Christian Rodriguez actually was. But since then, just very, very winnable fights. Terrence Mitchell, Ricky Tercios, Arichi Long, now against Vince Morales. And some people might not like that maybe he's getting like kind of favored by the UFC. But I think if you're going to take someone into the organization who's that young, you don't want to completely stifle their growth. And so this is kind of closer to like what he'd be fighting on the higher level regional scene. Still tougher, and honestly, his growth still might kind of get stifled because he's not able to strike as freely against some less dangerous guys. But you don't want to just throw him to the wolves and ruin his durability right out of the gate. He's somewhat limited as a striker, but is just a relentless grappler. He's very good at racking up control time and does have plus submission skills. On the other side here with Vince Morales, he has a 3-7 UFC record. I honestly think he's better than like a 30% win rate guy in the UFC. The bantamweight weight class is just so rough. Like a lot of times when you see guys with a record like that bad, like 3-7 in the UFC, they typically don't belong, and maybe they kind of got into the promotion in a lucky way. They were facing bad competition. They come in, they pick up a timely win where they keep, getting new contracts. Vince Morales is like too good to be fighting on the regional scene. Like this is his, I think, second stint in the UFC. When he was out of the promotion, he was running through like high quality guys, finishing them on the regional scene. Then he gets in the UFC and he's just like not quite good enough to beat, the dudes, even maybe towards the bottom of the bantamweight weight class. But he's well-rounded, 7 knockouts, 5 submission wins. He's tough to finish. He's only been finished one time in the UFC, and that was by leg kicks against Chris Gutierrez. He fought another kind of young prospect in Elijah Smith in his first fight back in the UFC. Lost a decision, but it was a tough fight. Really kind of pushed Elijah Smith in that one. And I think the path to victory here for Vince Morales is pretty similar to what Christian Rodriguez did, and that's just like weather the early grappling storm in round 1, scramble, really make Raul Rosas work, and then you're hoping he gasses himself out and you can win the second and third round. That would be the path to victory. I think Rosas is just going to be the better guy here. I'm going to pick Raul Rosas by submission. I'll go round 1. I think if he's submitting him, it's probably going to be pretty early on. Next up, we have David Martinez taking on Saimon Oliveira. Martinez is making his UFC debut here. He is pretty purely a striker, 11-1, 9 knockouts. He's coming off a decision win on the Contender Series. Oliveira is 0-2 in the UFC. He has not been super active. His UFC debut was in 2022. Lost a decision to Tony Gravely. Then in 2023, he was knocked out by Daniel Marcos. Has not fought since then. He has one singular win since 2020. And when you have like a young, interesting kind of upcoming prospect coming into the UFC, I have a really tough time picking the guy who's already fallen against UFC competition and has been out of the sport for a while, hasn't found success since 2020. I'm going to go with David Martinez here by decision. Now we are on to potentially like the second most important fight when it comes to actually like rankings in the UFC. We have Kelvin Gastelum taking on Joe Pyfer. I'm going to be honest here. I think this is just an awful matchup for Kelvin Gastelum. You look at Joe Pyfer, his skill set. He is a big physical middleweight. He hits really hard, has a solid ground game. If you were going to try to beat Joe Pyfer, you'd probably try to gas him out in a 5-rounder, like we kind of saw him fade against Jack Hermanson. This is a 3-round fight. I don't think Gastelum's going to be able to push a pace, and stay safe where Pyfer's actually getting tired and losing like the second and third round. Joe Pyfer's 4-1 in the UFC. He has finished all 4 of his wins. And then we look at Kelvin Gastelum. His last fight was down at 170. Was supposed to be down at 170. He misses weight. I have a bad taste in my mouth from Kelvin Gastelum from this. So he knew he was going to miss weight. Didn't tell Daniel Rodriguez until I think like right before the weigh-ins or maybe like the night before. So then D-Rod like isn't even in a position where he can hold on to the weight. Like he had to eat to like weigh in at what he needed to for that fight. And then he like wins a close decision. Someone who was, once competing for a belt at 185, now, can't even pull away from D-Rod in a matchup where he was probably the much heavier guy. Since 2019, he's just been completely outmatched against legit competition. He is pretty durable though, which is my question. Like, I am going to be picking Joe Pyfer here. I've just gone back and forth on knockout or decision. I think Joe Pyfer could be the guy to kind of break the durability here of Kelvin Gastelum. We have seen him get hurt, but he recovers pretty quickly. We saw it in the Izzy fight. I believe he got dropped against Robert Whitaker. I'm going to go with Joe Pyfer round one. I think, Pyfer potentially really just knocks him out of contention here in both weight classes. And then I believe this is the third to final fight. We have Ronaldo Rodriguez taking on Kevin Borjas. For Rodriguez here, he is 2-0 in the UFC. Had, kind of a fun win against Ode Osborne on the Sphere card. Got hurt bad early on. Weathered an early storm. Ended up winning the second and third rounds. He's a well-rounded fighter. 7 knockout wins. 5 submission wins. On the other side here with Borjas, he has not found the same success in the UFC. He is 0-2 in the promotion, but has faced the tougher competition. Like, his 2 losses are to Joshua Van and Alessandro Costa. Like, that's pretty tough, 2 guys to start off your UFC career against. He is pretty solely a striker. 8 of his 9 wins are by knockout. He has had some issues with the takedown defense. Even in the Contender Series fight that he won, he was still taken down 5 times. And he's also been outstruck in both of his fights. And when I'm picking some of these matchups, I don't love the guys who seemingly have like one route to victory just in terms of like outstriking their opponent. But then they're also getting outstruck by other guys in their previous matchups. So like, he was outstruck by both Van and Costa. So it's just not a great sign. I think Rodriguez is going to be able to mix things up here. I think he'll be fine on the feet. And I think he can have some success in the grappling department. So I'm going to go with Rodriguez by decision. And then I believe we have reached the co-main event here. This is a banger. This is awesome matchmaking. Manuel Torres taking on Drew Dober. For Torres, he has a pretty large frame for lightweight. He's aggressive. He's explosive. He hits hard. He throws good kicks. Has nice elbows. We saw him have a nasty knockout early in his UFC career with an elbow. He also has a pretty solid submission game. Haven't seen it as much in the UFC, but he does have that in his bag. He is kill or be killed. He has a 15-3 record. He has 7 knockout wins, 7 submission wins, only gone to decision 1 time, and then his 2 losses or his 3 losses, knocked out in one of them, submitted in the other 2. He is 3-1 in the UFC. Those 4 fights have been round 1 knockout win, round 1 knockout win, round 1 submission win, and then round 1 knockout loss on the Sphere card against Ignacio Bahamondes, which kind of an interesting matchup because both guys just super large for this weight class. He is aggressive, he is powerful, he's dangerous, but he also leaves himself open. We saw Ignacio hurt him bad on 2 different instances where he's coming in, he's, overreaching with, I think it was his left, and Ignacio's just hitting him with a fade back power shot. So I think that could be available here for Drew Dober, but Dober also doesn't have the frame of Ignacio to kind of manage distance in the same way. He's going to look like, I think, the much smaller guy in this matchup, at least in terms of height and reach. For Drew Dober, kind of on a rough stretch here. He has lost 3 of his last 4, but against very solid competition. John Silva, Renato Moicano, Matt Frivola. He's a powerful striker. He's a super explosive athlete. He's also just dangerous in these dog fights. We've seen him get in these fights where he can get hurt early, but he can weather an early storm. He had an insane comeback against Terrence McKinney where he looked like he was completely cooked. Ended up finishing Terrence McKinney in that same round. He was getting touched up by Bobby Green before he knocked him out. And then as of late, when he is winning fights, it is by knockout. His last 7 wins have all come by KO. I think there's some concern I have here, Drew Dober, in terms of his durability. Like, that was something he was really able to bank on in some of his earlier fights. We have seen him getting hurt more as of late, so that's not ideal. But I'm still going to go with Drew Dober here. If he got nuked early on, I would not be shocked. But I think he can weather an early storm. I think Torres, if he gets extended in fights, I think he's going to fade. I think he's going to become less and less defensively responsible. And I just trust Drew Dober more in these dogfights. The durability has been there for the most part. And we just have more experience with him in those fights against better competition. So I think Drew Dober might have a tough first round, or they could go back and forth, but I think he ends up finding a knockout sometime in round 2. And then we have arrived here at the main event, Brandon Moreno taking on Steve Erceg. Now, I will say, this is a really fun fight. I think it's going to be entertaining for the fans. It is very odd matchmaking, though, because you have a guy like Brandon Moreno who's probably 1 win away from a title shot, and instead of fighting someone, I don't know, like a Kai Kara France rematch, a Manel Kopp fight, he's fighting someone who just came off a KO loss to Kaikara France. And Steve Erceg was already kind of launched up into that title shot where he didn't really have the wins to back it up. But I'm not going to complain too much because we still get this fun matchup. For Brandon Moreno, he's had very interesting performances in his last two. I thought he fought a really bad fight against Brandon Royval where he was just like winging overhands, wasn't mixing it up in the way he normally does, and then had a really strong performance against Amir Albazi, who I think kind of showed he doesn't really belong at the top. For Albazi, the performance is interesting because he did look great on the feet. I think the most impressive part of that was just his takedown defense not getting controlled. Even though I thought Kaikara France beat Amir Albazi, he was getting controlled for portions of that fight. That did not happen for Brandon Moreno, but I also don't know if like that positive really carries over to this matchup against Steve Erceg. For Erceg, like I mentioned, he is coming off that knockout loss to Kaikara France. Before that, he lost a very close fight to Pantoja that I had 2-2 heading into the 5th round. If he didn't get controlled in that final round, I think he would have had an opportunity to take that belt. I think a big question in this matchup is Erceg going to try to grapple? I think somewhat surprisingly to some people, 6 of Erceg's 12 wins are by submission. He just hasn't really gone to the grappling that much in the UFC. He only has a 26% takedown accuracy. So I don't know if it's something he's actually going to be able to get going. I think if he mixes it up and at least makes Brandon Moreno think about the takedown threat, that could help him in this matchup. But this is probably going to take place primarily on the feet. Both guys have very clean boxing. I just feel like Moreno has so much more 5-round, high-level experience. He has a 5-round win against Amir Albazi. He went to a majority draw 5 rounds against Figgy. He has, round 3 finishes against Figgy 2 times, Kaikara France in 5-rounders. So the experience is just so in favor of Moreno. We know so much more about his skill set. We know he can beat some of these top guys. He's also never been finished and just has insane durability. So I think this one is going to be competitive. If Moreno fights the same way he fought against Brandon Royval, I think that Steve Erceg could definitely take this one. But I'm going to lean towards Moreno here. Just the experience. We've seen him go 5 rounds. The durability, I'm going to pick him by decision. But that is going to wrap it up for my full card predictions here. It's a fun card. Love when the UFC is out of the Apex. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.